Right, so Graham asked me to share my story, and we actually had lunch one of the earlier days this week, and I was telling him, I said, I don't know that I've ever really talked about or given my testimony. And it sort of surprised me that I hadn't really thought about it in that way. And so this will be a first for me. I've spoken to a lot of groups about a lot of different things, but not really about my testimony and some of the things that have happened. But I grew up in the Methodist Church very early on. In fact, I grew up in Page's Methodist Church. Woo!
Wow.
Yeah, first Methodist of Edmond. Yeah. Go Bulldogs. All right, so, yeah, well, that was the only place you could go back then, Page. Yeah. So, but when I was 11, my parents got divorced. And that was the end of our church-going days. So I never went back to church, really, minus maybe Christmas and Easter or Mother's Day or something, until I got married. And when I married my smoking hot wife right there, right, she and I, she said, well, I think we should start going to church. And I said, well, that's a fine plan. I said, but Sunday mornings, that's kind of there's a lot of stuff going on Sunday mornings that I like to do. And so I told her, here's the deal, right? She said, well, if we're going to go to church, we ought to go to Sunday school too. And I said, honey, that's 2 hours. So I gave her an ultimatum. I said, I'll pick one. I'll go to either one or the other. And just like anybody that's married knows, we went to both Sunday school and church. But she did a great thing. She got me into a great class with a lot of guys like me that liked like fantasy football, and we played softball, and we played golf, and we had pickup basketball, and all of a sudden it was like I was hanging out with these guys and becoming friends with them. And it was the start of my rediscovery about who God was. See, I kind of knew God when I was younger, and I believed in Him, sort of, as I went through college and high school. I knew He was there, but I didn't really do anything with that. I just kind of let that lay around, and I certainly didn't live like I should have been living. So we started going to church. Well, I started learning about how I should be living, or really what I should be doing when I went to church there at Church of the Servant in Oklahoma City. Well, then my job moved us to Chinook, Kansas. And if any of you ever been to Chinook, there's probably more cows than people. So, yeah. So it's kind of a small place. And Jeannie and I got there, and she cried every day for like a year. That's true. All right, so that's not really that much of an exaggeration. And so, yeah, it's pretty close to right. And so but we grew a lot there in our faith, and we were in a Sunday school class with a lot of different people from a whole lot of different walks of life, and people that were much, much older than us that had grandkids, and people that were our age, and it was a very eclectic kind of class. And it was really a place for me to start learning more about what God wanted for me and what God wanted to do with my life. And so then about 2.5 years, 3 years later, we moved to, oh, by the way, when we were in Chinook, Brady is born. All right. So Brady is born in Chinook, and then a couple years later, we moved to Olathe, Kansas City. And we started a church there, and basically it's the same story. We learned more about what God had in store for me in my life. And I was learning about what God wanted from me, and sort of what I would really say is I was using the Bible and what I was learning in class as more like, I'd say the Bible was like an owner's manual. So if any of you had a car or well, you guys are smart enough to use your iPhones without looking stuff up. But if you have an Xbox or something and you want to see how it works, you just look at the owner's manual. And that's sort of how I was using the Bible. I was using it kind of to know what rules I was supposed to be following and how to do things the right way. And it was a lot of, it was kind of rule following. There was a lot of things in my head. And so that's kind of how I was approaching God. And I did it in a very like a cerebral way where we studied stuff and we talked about things, but it was very it wasn't very personal. And so a couple of years after that, Easton was born in Kansas City. And every time we had a baby, we moved. That was kind of the plan. God's plan, apparently. And so we moved here to Broken Arrow. And we were invited by one of my peers at work to come to First. And his name is James Harmon at work. But at church, his name is Doug. All right? So anywhere other than church, anywhere other than work, he goes by Doug. And at church, he goes by James. Or backwards. Yeah, you get the gist. Anyway, so I can't figure it out because I call him James. But at work, he's James. Everywhere else, he's Doug. All right? So he invited us to church, and he invited us to the Trailblazer Sunday School class. So Jeannie and I showed up, with all the kids in tow, and it takes a production to get into church. And so we get here, and we walk into this Trailblazers class at 9:45, and I said, "Hey, well, how'd you find out about us, sir?" Well, hey, James Harmon invited us, and they say, "Who's that?" And so. From that moment on, I thought, well, this is pretty funny. He invited me to a Sunday school class, but he doesn't even go. So turns out his name was Doug at church. And so we began to be in the Sunday school class. And this is where we really shaped a lot of our early foundation in this church. We got into a disciple Bible study class. And disciple Bible studies were you read about 80% of the Bible over about 9 months. And in the Disciple Bible class were Lauren and Jeff Moore, so Ryan's parents, right? And then Susan and Keith Kaiser, Sam's parents.
And Mason. What's up?
And what? And no Sam back there too. Right? And Mason, right? And then we also had Danny and Katie Sneed, longtime members and part of this youth group for a long time, right? And then we had, Scott and Cheryl Hildebrand. Right? So that was who we started our first church experience with. And those became kind of pillars for us when things changed. And that's really what I want to talk to you about next is kind of, up until this point, I knew who God was. I was trying to live my life the right way. I knew what God wanted me to do. But I didn't really know why he wanted me to do it. And so we went on, and many of you have heard a little bit about this next part, but I'll tell you for some of you don't know. But we went on a vacation with Jeannie's twin sister and her 2 kids and her husband and Jeannie's mom and all of our family. So that's about 37 people altogether.
11.
Or 11. All right, and so we went to Orange Beach, Alabama. And we drove down there, and it was a big thing. And I didn't feel too well, and I started feeling worse. And in fact, by about the second or third day, I couldn't get out of bed, literally. And Jeannie says, "Well, I'm taking you to the doctor." And I said, "No, you don't need to take me to the doctor. I'll be fine. You guys go to the beach, have fun, blah, blah, blah." Well, she takes me to the doctor, and you're getting to see a pattern. She takes me to the doctor, right? And we go to an urgent care clinic, and he takes my vital signs, and he says, "Hang on, I'll be right back." If anybody ever tells you that, that is not a good sign. Right? So he says, "Hang on, I'll be right back." Right? All the time, Jeannie's twin sister, Jamie, and David, her husband, have all the kids, and they're at the beach, and they're having a great time. They don't know anything's going on, really. So he comes out, and he says, "Hey, by the way, I need you to go immediately to this internist up the road." Right? And he's expecting you. All right. So we drive a little ways, and we go into this internist's office, and there's about 75 people in the waiting room. And I'm thinking, oh man, this is going to be a long wait. And I get up to the counter, I say, "Hey, my name's Jason Moore." She goes, "Come on back." That's not a good sign. So that happens to you, that's also not a good sign. So I get in there, and the nurse takes my vital signs, and she says, "I'll be right back." All right? And Again, that's not what Ryan. It's not a good sign. That's correct. That's not a good sign. So she comes in and she says, "I'm getting the doctor, but just so you know, you'll be going to the hospital." I was like, "Oh, whatever." I'm like, "I'm not even. I mean, yes, I don't feel good, but I'm not hospital bad, right?" And so the doctor comes in and he takes my vital signs. Yeah, he did. Well, maybe not. Okay. Maybe I don't remember. Anyway, the doctor came in and, but yeah, I did too. You're not remembering this story. This is my story. I'll tell your story. Right. All right, so the doctor said, though, I know this is right, because the doctor said, it was his wife that was the nurse, and he said, "Well, my wife's wrong, you're not going to the hospital." And I was like, "Huh, I told you so. You're going immediately to ICU." If they tell you that, what, Ryan?
It's not a good
It's not a good sign, right? And so
Oh my God.
I went immediately to ICU, and I spent 8 days in ICU. And I lost 30 pounds, right? And the whole time I was there, I ate, literally, this is not an exaggeration, I ate half a grape. That's the truth, honest truth. Really, I ate half a grape. It was pretty bad. A lot of good stories happened there. Some of them I remember. I do remember I was very, very weak. I mean, incredibly weak. And so I couldn't get up at all. And one morning I woke up, and if you've ever been to the hospital and seen somebody that can't get up, well, they have to go to the bathroom in a different way than they normally do.
Amen.
Right, Sam? You with me, Sam? All right, so Sam's with me after his recent experience. Right, and so they give you this, like, milk jug kind of thing. And that's not that graphic. Oh, so, anyway, so I had a milk jug. And so I woke up one morning, I need to go to the bathroom, right? And so I kind of turned to my left, and my milk jug is on the wall on the floor. It's about by where Tyler is over there. Right? And so now I can't get up at all, right? And so, like the good patient that I'm going to do, I'm just going to reach down and get my little button, you know, that you can push to call the nurse, right? And the nurse will come in and I'll say, you know, I got to have my milk jug. So I look down and the button is on the floor. That's not a good thing. All right. So I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll just yell, right? And they'll what? They'll come in. Problem is, I couldn't yell. I could barely talk. Like, so my next thought was, I'll just throw something hard at the window. Right? And kind of get their attention. Yeah, I got nothing to throw. Anyway, I can't lift anything. So,
It's the one that I went to the hotel.
yeah, so she left me. Anyway, so I did. Anyway, so I tell this story. I only tell you this, that ultimately what I had to do was pull the lead off my heart monitor, and then a bunch of people came. And I said, "I'm really okay. I just got to what?" So a lot of good things came out of that. Some incredible things happened as a result of that. All kinds of really amazing things happened to Jeannie and I while we were there. We would get things in the mail all the time. Cards, and we were part of a group called Walk to Emmaus, and somebody sent us this giant ceramic multicolored chicken in the mail, which was their symbol, which was a really cool thing. We actually had the Methodist Church in Foley, Alabama. The minister came and prayed over us, and then they collected an offering at their church to give to us, and it was pretty unbelievable things were happening. Back here at home, they were taking care of our house, and they actually, the Kaisers broke into our house and had a prayer vigil with our Sunday school class in our living room. Pretty cool. Your parents were there, of course. And when I got back, I can really identify with what Patty was talking about. Because when I got back, I was really kind of mad and angry at God, thinking, why do I have to have this thing happen to me. And what I began to realize was, through a lot of time, this didn't happen overnight, but what I began to realize is that this illness was not about me. It created a lot of opportunity for our church and the people in our church to show me what the love of Christ was really about. And so what I tell people about that is that they saved my life. Not so much physically, I barely live, but not so much physically, but spiritually, because they changed how I thought about God. From what God wanted me to do to why God wanted me to do it. And really what that event happened in my life was it took what I had been learning and working on, and it took it from head knowledge to heart knowledge. So when you know why you're doing something, right, there's so much more of a deeper connection. And really what happened was, for the first time in my, 40 years of life, I found I had a relationship with God. It wasn't just a thing to study. It was a feeling. It was a connection. And so I went from being a rule follower, hey, I'm just going to try to follow all the rules and do these things the right way because that's what God tells me, and, Romans 6, I should do this thing, so I'm just trying to do it that way. I went from that to having this deeper connection with God, and then doing the right thing just came naturally. It just started to be part of who I was. And so that's when I came up here. As I was thinking about this, I really think this is kind of my penance for all the years of living like an idiot. Is that it was time for me to give back and to give you guys the things that I missed out on. And I never had anything like this. And I think, man, if I'd had this, I'd be a lot better person now than I am. Because I'd be so much further ahead and so much further down the road. And so I want you guys to understand how lucky you are to have this. How lucky you are to have people like Graham and Paige that care for you and love on you, and the leaders that you have. And that's an amazing thing. So don't take that for granted. And as I began to really understand what having Jesus in your heart looked like, I came upon a scripture that I've really tried to live out in my life. And this is from the Message. So it's Romans 12, 1 and 2. And it's actually in my Bible, it's actually a page that's torn because I've looked at it so many times. But it's a special thing for me, and I love the Message translation here. And I'll read it to you. But so here's what I want you to do. God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for Him. And I'm going to stop right there. I'm about as ordinary as a person that you can find. And I don't do anything very well. But that's not what God is telling us. Paul is writing to us in Romans, and he's saying what? This is what I want you to do. Do everything that you do great. So when your mom asks you to make your bed, make it what?
Good. Great.
Make it great.
Great.
Lance and
It sounds silly, but this is what God is asking you to do. Right? You can hear all kinds of stories up here. You've heard some great stories from Patty and Pam, and you'll hear other great stories. But here's the thing. Actions speak louder than words. What's Paul telling us right here? He's saying, take your ordinary life and make it awesome. And then he goes on to say, look, don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Right? Instead, fix your attention on God. I lie to my Sunday school class all the time because I tell them, hey, you guys, right? You know, when you get to be about 25 or 26, right, you grow out of peer pressure. Except that's a big fat lie, right? The fact of the matter is you guys feel peer pressure, so do we, right? And this is what it's telling you. Don't give in to peer pressure, right? Don't fit into that. Instead, do what?
Be different.
Fix your attention on God, right? And look what he did. He did what he'll do what he did to me. He'll change you from the inside out. He'll make you understand why. And then it says, readily recognize what he wants from you and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity. That could be Jim O and I sometimes.
90%.
But yeah, God brings the best out of you and he develops well-formed maturity in you. And that's really what I learned through all this and what I keep trying to learn and trying to do better is to understand that, like I mentioned, the illness was not about me. And the more things that I can make less about me and more about others is when I find that I'm really understanding what God wants from me and responding to it quickly. And it's a challenge. I don't do it well every day, but I'm getting better. And my goal is to put others first in everything that I do. And then my ordinary walking around, going to work, eating, sleeping life becomes pretty amazing. And my actions will speak louder than my words. Thanks.